My name is Stefan Van Raay and I'm the invited curator for the exhibition Lee Miller, surrealist photographer here in Museo de Arte Moderno. A curator is somebody who very often has an art historical background or a professional, museum professional background. And you come up with an idea, you do some research about a certain subject, and you find, well, when you're independent like I am, then you find a location or a museum or a gallery who is interested in the subject you're proposing. And then you basically make a selection together with lenders, or one lender in this case. Anthony Penrose is one lender. See if they're interested to bring their works to this proposed exhibition in this proposed venue, and then you start writing the catalogue, writing the text, asking for loans everywhere, and basically the whole process of the exhibition. Then you were setting out the exhibition at a certain point, and look at the text on the walls, look at the labels. And so it's basically the whole package. So that's what curators in museums do, but they do more because they also look after the collections of the museum. But in this case, as an exhibition curator, you just do only, in my case, only the exhibition itself. I used to be a director of a museum of modern and contemporary art in Britain, in England, in the south of England. Not far away from where Tony Penrose lives, and it was rather small when I started, and now it's one of the most important museums for modern and contemporary art in Britain. What I hope, for instance in this example, this photographer is not known in Mexico at all, Lee Miller. She's not known in the whole of Latin America. And so what I hope with this exhibition is that the Mexican public discover a new photographer, new work, and that's the reason why it's kind of like a retrospective. It's an overview of her work. I mean, there would be wonderful themes, within her, like Man Ray and Lee Miller, or Lee Miller and Picasso, or Lee Miller and the Second World War. There are beautiful themes within, but because it's the first time, we thought it would be better to give a complete overview of the work. And what I hope is that the people discover that she's a very important photographer of the 20th century. I think it's very relevant to this museum. Actually, it's very relevant to Mexico, I think, as well, because Mexico has produced fantastic photographers. And a lot of foreigners came here in the 20th century to photograph. And this museum has shown, very recently, Giselle Freund. Then there was that beautiful show, Edward Weston, Tina Modotti, that was just before, last year I think it was. So there is a tradition here to show photography of the 20th century. So in that sense, she fits very beautifully in the programming of MAM. It's very interesting because the Surrealist movement basically produced a number of great women artists. I think it's the first time that so many women artists come out of an artistic movement. I know that a lot of these women started as muses of older famous artists. So, basically Leonora Carrington. She fell in love with Max Ernst. Of course, she was his muse. She was 20 years old. He was 46 years old. She was his muse. But, within the shortest time, she became an artist in her own right. You see the same with Lee Miller. She falls in love with Man Ray. She learns photography, and she becomes a photographer in her own right. Remedios Varo, Benjamin Perret. Very interesting. Benjamin Perret, one of the co-signatories of the Surrealist Manifesto, 1924. She becomes part of that circle. She becomes an artist very quickly in her own right. She's part of that surrealist movement. And you see that very, very happen all the time and time again within that movement. So it produced a number of women artists. Of course, for a younger generation now of women, it is very interesting to look at, you know, what I would call the first large group of emancipated women artists. In the 20th century, photography developed very quickly in an art form. I see it as an art form, and particularly if you look at people like Lee Miller. And there is something incredibly, how do you say that? Of course there is the reality they try to photograph, but then there's of course the added, how do you say that, eye of the photographer, him or herself. It's very interesting. I met in the south of France Cartier-Bresson, the famous, and I thought he was dead, but he wasn't dead. He was alive, and I was staying in a house not far away, and all of a sudden I was invited for dinner with him. He was one who said that photography wasn't an art. But I didn't trust what he was saying, and he said that he never changed his shots. You know, that he took a photograph and he would never cut it or enlarge it, or, you know, that was the shot he had taken. But if you look at his work, it's incredible. It can only be Cartier-Bresson. It can only be his eye. So there is something added to the sheer, you know, taking a photograph of reality. No, Cartier-Bresson is taking a photograph of reality, and it becomes a Cartier-Bresson, and it's without any doubt. And it's the same with Edward Weston, it's the same with Tina Modotti, it's the same with many photographers. So I think that kind of added value, that personal value, makes it for me very interesting. It's very interesting because, of course, surrealism really, in terms of European movement, came to Mexico in, I would say, in the beginning of the Second World War, when people like Carrington, Varro, what's his name, the famous Buñuel, you know, all those people came to Mexico and fleeing the Second World War, and they came here. Leonora told me, I was a very close friend. I did an exhibition of her work in 2010, and it was called Amigas Surrealistas, or Surreal Friends. And it was Leonora Carrington, Remedios Vara, and Kati Horna, by the way, one of the best photographers, and nobody knows her. I think she really needs more recognition, because she was a front war artist in the Republican, you know, the Civil War, and her photographs of the fronts are extraordinary. I mean, they are amazing. Of that, you know, how she covered that, and actually, she did it in the same way as Lee Miller covered the Second World War. But okay, to go back to Leonora, when she came here, she met Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, and they were the establishment in Mexico, you know, Sigueros, Orozco, you know, that whole group. Their philosophy was completely different from surrealism. You know, that was about reality, educating the people, it was about communism, it was about the revolution and all that. And they were very macho, these guys. And there were these incredibly elegant, emancipated, sexually liberal women from Europe, for instance, like Varro, like Karen, and they didn't like it at all. They did absolutely not. And it took a bit of time before people started to understand what this very strange group of people from abroad were doing, and then it became part of, you know, of the they became part of the Mexican canon of art of the 20th century.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you very much.